Hey everyone, it's Dr. John here. Usually it's Psych in the van, but tonight, since the van's in the shop, it's the sister channel, Psychinthebenz. So, I got a fresh dispatch here right off the printer. I wrote this up today. It's about a process that I'm working my way through, and it's interesting, I think. So let's roll. So this video is my current best attempt. Well, video, it's also going to be an article. So I'm going to try to write something up on my existential phenomenological experience about how I believe now I am working at the threshold between what might be called the seen and the unseen on this journey, if you will, to encounter the Anima. We'll explain that a little bit later. And this experience has recently, I think, been amplified in my psyche. And I've been working on this with some well qualified people. So, from a Jungian standpoint, so Jungian psychology, the anima refers to essentially the personification of all feminine psychological tendencies in a man's psyche. So this is the archetype of life itself. So this is part one. Here I'm going to, as best as I can, lay down some of the theoretical structure from which I can make meaning and order out of my encounter with anima, and then we'll expand on that in a few videos. Sorry, I'm kind of going off what I wrote up because it's fairly late at night, just getting this one in before the wire goes out, or whatever they used to use in press terms, the deadline. I have no idea. And I'm also pretty tired, so I'm a little loopy right now. As you can imagine, I've been researching, and I've been working on this like for the past, I don't know, 3 hours or something. So let's get to it. So the origins of this journey, I can't really pinpoint like where I would say it began, but I suspect it's been ongoing for quite a while. But something's going on now where it's like coming into, I don't even know like how to describe it, coming into focus maybe. So, and from a Jungian standpoint, this encounter with what I'm calling it like an encounter with the anima, I guess, it makes sense developmentally. This is hitting me at midlife, because this is a time essentially, and well, I'll speak about my life. It's not probably not universal for everyone, but I'm essentially noticing the shift in myself away from what I'll describe as like my drive, or like my vitality, and like getting like maybe like what is the source of some of like that which drives me, perhaps. Okay, so it's shifting away from what we might call ego identified life projects. So the essentially the meaning in my life is shifting away from the CV items, the publications, any the quote unquote being known in the field, whatever you want to say. And instead, what happens in this process is that there's the shift towards a process or the vitality being more powerfully driven by dreams. Yes, like the kind that you have when you're sleeping. I pay attention to those dreams. I write them down whenever I can. emotions, of course. See, I mean, I've always uh, been. I don't want to say like um, fueled by emotions, but I think emotions, not for all of my life, because I certainly went through a phase where they were more repressed. Um, but I bring the emotions now, um, and then also what I would call these, and maybe more acceptable mainstream Eurocentric psychological terms, deeper intuitive experiences. Maybe that's even stretching it for some of the mainstream. But what you might even so I'm adding this. I don't know if this would fit within a Jungian perspective because that's not really my theoretical orientation. I'm sort of learning it right now out of like out of I would say out of necessity, because I think the Jungian model has the most has the most resources or okay, let me put it this way. So Jung made the best map of this territory. So I'm going to learn everything I can about how to navigate here. Okay, let's see. So, driven by dreams, emotions, this deep intuition, and seemingly what one might call, I don't know, like if synchronicity is the right term, could be, but like to put it in more language that people understand, like the like psychic type experiences, and with that, this is common, I think, amongst therapists, and where I have this experience that happens more times than we could just say coincidence, where I'll think of someone, maybe it's a patient I haven't seen in months, or in some cases more than a year. I start thinking about them, and then lo and behold, the next day I get a phone call from them or an email or something like that. And then also had this experience with a friend of mine, who we had a couple encounters of like I was thinking about, oh, like I really need to get in touch with her, and then when I reached out to her, she's like, I was thinking about you, and that's happened a few times. So there's some opening in that way. That's kind of I'm tracking that. So um, some may think of these as more like irrational forces. So what's coming to me now is maybe it's a movement away from being more fully driven by rational um, thinking. I don't know if that's the way to put it. By the rational versus the irrational. But to be honest with you, like I think my family and other people that knew me throughout my growing up would say I was probably never really much of a rational person. So I don't know what to make of that. But okay, and I want to note that of course I'm still like most people caught up in my ego, but I'm noticing some from what I would say like an existential standpoint is like a loosening in what's been referred to as this closure in being. So, in other words, what I'm referring to is how I am essentially aware of the ways in which I've turned away from the immediate present moment, the present moment, like right here, right now, moment at hand, which I think many people do without realizing it. Um, so, I'm moving away from, in the past, I was moving away from the moment, and go into this sort of like self protected enclosure mode, like go in the quote unquote panic room, if you will, without, I'm not talking literally going in a panic room, but like one armors themselves, defense mechanisms go up. So I still am susceptible to that, of course, but I think I'm moving some more out of that and really um, moving into more vulnerable space. But another way to think about this is basically getting or having greater ability to um, not get stuck in like self-absorption. And I also have a flaw in that whenever I feel like somebody is like sort of like um, I don't know how to put it, like sort of like coming at me, like not in like a physical or violent way, but maybe like emotionally. Yeah, I think it's got to be more of like an emotional thing. Um, what that would be is like that sometimes the empathy fizzles out there, right? And then I'm like, because I'm back in that self protection mode. So can't have empathy if you're defending yourself. So we got to step out of that more. Um, and of course, I use the word terror of dropping into true vulnerability. So I didn't really take time to come up with a definition of that, but there's kind of like the, you can sort of pretend to be vulnerable and I'll use all the cliche terms, this and that, but I'm talking about like the really like oh man, it's like a heart opening, and you're like maybe there's like some tears you're trying to hold back, or like you're really speaking from the heart. That's kind of what I'm talking about there. So yeah, as I noted before, I've never been one to like say like exclusively emphasize rational process as being the quote unquote only process. But what I'm noticing now is a very distinct experience where I'm starting to make this connection between this this quest for the anima, and recognizing now that it's internal. Okay, rather than being what I would say is more like of my earlier adulthood, of course, adolescent, having this drive or desire for what here I'm calling. I got this couple words from the research I did. The quote unquote out there woman. Okay, because we're talking anima energy, so that would be like speaking of like feminine energy, which we naturally associate with women. It's not universally like that. I'm speaking Jungian terms here, so I'm not going to get into that larger discussion. Got to stay focused. So instead, this is about recognizing. Okay, yeah. So um, I didn't do a good job writing this as I'm reading it because it's not clear, but I think what I'm saying is, so rather than having that desire to sort of go for the quote unquote out there woman, it's now realizing that any woman that is out there is essentially what we might say a living, breathing image of my own capacity to be this vessel for love, imagination, and receptivity. So I didn't, as I said, I didn't do a good job here writing this, but um, what I wanna clarify is these qualities: say love, imagination, receptivity, creative. I think I'll get into this a little bit later, but this sort of is more of a feminine aspect, I think. Um, so again, this is realization, okay, that any relationship with a woman, again, in quotes, out there, cannot be grasped. It just can't. And it also cannot be gotten through any sense of will, any sense of control. So the big shift then is she must be received. So I'm going to reference Alan Watts is teaching here, because he has this great image that he talks about where, like, what happens if you try to grasp water. It's like the harder you grasp at the water, the more the water just kind of like explodes out of your hands, right? So the antidote to that kind of grasping and trying to control, clinging, all that stuff that we can fall into out of our own vulnerabilities, anxieties, etc. But instead, you can cup the hands, right, and then the water fills the vessel of your hands. So again, that's Alan Watts's teaching there. So, and then that water is received and held. So this quality of receptivity. So moving back a little bit more in focus to this Jungian analysis. So it's the ego, perhaps it's the ego desiring to, quote unquote, like possess the feminine image. I'm not talking about possess like a physical woman. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the internal image of the divine feminine, or the this quality of anima. And so basically we can think of the ego here. The ego, it means different things in different psychological systems, but here we can think of it as the subject of all personal acts of consciousness. And that comes from Jung himself. So then I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Again, mostly this channel is about existentialism, but I'm going to have to expand on that, as I said, to be more inclusive of topics, but we're always going to tie them back to existentialism. So the ego, through the existential lens, the ego is perhaps comparable or equivalent to Heidegger's everyday self. So the, in quotes, being in the world that must act and choose, but often loses sight of the deeper ground of being. So ground of being in bold, because we've got to define that. So the deeper ground of being from which it arises. Okay, this will twist your mind probably if you're not as deep in this stuff as me. It's kind of, I'm still grasping at it. So basically, the deeper ground of being. Here I'm going to take two different lenses on that. So one lens is going to be more of a theological one from Paul Tillich. So if you're not familiar with him, existential theologian, at least that's how I think of him. So he has this quote here that God is not a being among beings, but capital B, being itself, or the ground of being. Okay, so the word God is used there. Put whatever word you want there that for you represents what's a good way of putting it? Like some kind of like energy that is beyond one's understanding, maybe. Well, we think of eminence and transcendence, of course. So like the divine, both being like immanently present in everything, but also transcendent, meaning it goes beyond the world of things, if you will. Okay, so this view of God here too is not some personal entity within reality, but what we're talking about instead is, and this is where it gets like to be a little mind twisting, is the depth and power of existence itself, the creative ground of all actuality. So I didn't invent the word actuality, but it was like boom, like it came into my mind as I was writing this. So I was like, I had to explore that. So I looked it up, and it's like, does that word actuality, is that true to this model here? And so it seems that it is. So here by actuality I mean the self-revelation of the ground of being the power of the divine becoming manifest in the finite and the concrete. And so this source was talking about like it can be thought of like, so we have the heartbeat, the pulse. It's the pulse of life in every person, every place, and every moment. Okay, so let's go through that again. So actuality refers to the self-revelation of the ground of being. So that's the power of the divine becomes manifest, meaning it's among this is me that I'm going to get into this, so it might not be fully accurate, but that's what we have the comments for. Manifest meaning it's coming into, it's making from the unseen, like the unseen, maybe like the untouchable, unfeelable, into the finite and concrete. So what that means is like a human being, for example, is finite and concrete. As far as I know, there ain't nobody that's lived forever in the physical form, in the physical vessel of the body, if you will. The body's concrete, like not like the concrete on the street, but like I can touch it. It's right here. It's right now. We're going to elaborate more on that from a phenomenological perspective as well in future videos. Can't do it all here. Okay. So we covered actuality there. Okay, so Paul Tillich was the theological definition of the ground of being. So let's, again, bring it back to somewhat more of the existential, Martin Heidegger's ontological definition. So, and again, people have, I don't want to get into the whole Heidegger stuff. Yeah, he's affiliated with the Nazis and stuff like that, but for his philosophy is amongst the most contributional, I don't even know if that's a word, is very important to where we're at in philosophy now. So we have to separate out that. I certainly don't approve of any involvement whatsoever in that kind of shit. Anyways, horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I can't even think about it. So he says that being is the groundless ground of being. So we're talking about mind twisting again. So being is the groundless ground of beings. So being, okay, so I have to make this clear. Being, the first being there, capital B, okay? The little b is beings like I think what we are. So let me see if I explained that more. So he's got a term for this groundless ground, German term, Abgrund, probably not saying that right. So to describe the non-objectifiable source from which beings appear. So little b beings appear. Capital B being, I can't pronounce this word, I'm not going to do it. So capital B being is not a cause or thing, but the open clearing that allows all entities to be. Okay. So again, how do you make sense out of that? So the way I think about this in my mind, and I don't know if I'm going to have it completely accurate because I'm still, as I mentioned, working with this, is really seeing that there's something that is described here as a non-objectifiable source from which beings appear. So there's some trying to figure out how to put it. The open clearing. So maybe if we just look at like there's a field. There's like a field that's wide open, and on that field, things come into being. So when we think of human beings, we sort of know how they come into being. At least now, right? I mean, who knows? Going back to the first human being, like it was evolutionary, right? Was it humans being created in the image and likeness of God, or was it the other way around? These are all philosophical debates. I'm not saying I'm holding one or the other. Anyways, okay, so what we were trying to understand there, why I got into that whole mess, was that's the ego. So we're talking about the role of the ego there, I believe. And let me just review so we know how we got there. Okay, so we got there because we were trying to understand that force of the grasping, and so the ego is what was behind that. So then we got to move into then this notion of the self. So in this model, it's self, capital S. Okay, so the self calls for transformation through the image of the divine feminine, the archetypal source of universal life, of birthing, of creation, of intuition, of nurture, all I'd say amongst some of the most important functions that exist. Okay, so more on capital S self. The archetype of wholeness and the organizing center of the complete psyche, if you will. Self as being the source from which consciousness arises and toward which it evolves. So we're still in this mind-bending stuff. So consciousness arises from the self, but then also evolves toward it. So here, okay, so this might clarify a little bit. So the self embraces both ego and unconscious, so human and divine, manifesting as the inner voice of guidance, meaning, and integration. So psychologically speaking, it's the regulating principle of individuation. Phenomenologically, it is the living field of capital B being in which self with little s and world participate. Okay. I'm going to have to make another video, I think, explaining these concepts further. Because, as I'm going through it, I didn't have time to really, go over this many times over because the goal was this weekend. Psychinthebenz, we got to do it. So here we are. Okay, so then let's try to tie things together. So when we get to the second video, which I've already got content for, I got to go through it and order it up in a way that I can make sense out of it. So in this ongoing, this is kind of like a summary. So in this ongoing encounter with the anima, and again, this is about my process, I've become aware of the need to release and soften my grasp on control, on fear, and of defensiveness, and of course, the many different, what we'll call illusions of mastery I create. So like being, like how one might engage in some like cognitive distortions of different kinds, perhaps. Okay, so we're in the midlife quest right now. Here, what I'm seeking, I now recognize what I'm seeking is a deeper connection with the anima within myself. Whereas before, love was sought outwardly as something, I can get love from somebody, I can find love. It's something to be attained, perhaps. But now I see really, like, I'm starting to really grasp this concept that love cannot be acquired, imported, or owned. So I probably wrote like 1,000 different poems on various muses, on this thinking, this thinking that love is that, but really we're looking inside now. So profound shift. Okay, so love, and this is existential here. Okay, so love is met only in the immediacy of the present moment. So that moment for me, like to really be in a space of presence with someone, that's sacred. That's that is that is essentially what it's all about, I think. So the sacred, and it's also deeply vulnerable. It's an opening of the heart, is how I experience it. I'm going to get into again the phenomenological experience of that. I think, and might not be the next video, but it might be. We'll have to see how things play out. Um, so through this awareness, it's a getting back to that again, that authentic participation in this living presence of the anima, again, as she manifests through experience itself. Is that another mind twister? So let me go through this and then I'll loop back a little bit. So this realization essentially turns my old model upside down. You know, from thinking it's like I have to go get a partner or something like that, like or chasing the quote unquote woman out there again. To instead we're entering. I view it as like entering communion with an energy that, guess what, it's been there all along. Okay, so unpacking that paragraph a little bit. The anima manifests through experience itself. Okay, so when encountered with the presence of a, say, a beautiful person, woman in this case, it's a reflection, almost like can I think of it as like a mirror? It's like reflecting, like through her presence, I become aware of this quality of anima within. So the mistake is to think it's something about that particular person that I'm getting this experience from, and that's indeed misguided, and it certainly led me to all sorts of effed up places in my life. Not going to get into that. So now I think we're finally getting it a little bit more dialed in. Okay, so I like that last sentence that I put together there. So entering communion with the energy that has been here all along. So again, it's like realizing like this like for me this is it's the place to be, and so really like I can really appreciate and enjoy life a lot more because I'm not caught up in this like clinginess, this grasping, this outward focus, this chase. Like, um, um, instead, I'm just like, oh, like I can be. So I'm gonna say fully present, but is anybody like, unless you're like super like enlightened to be fully present? We have moments of it, I think, but I think this embellishment of like to be fully awake, fully aware in the present moment for every moment doesn't happen. I think our brain is wired such that we're somewhat kind of moving in and out. We can train ourselves via, I think, mindfulness is yoga. Those are the two of the most important practices that I have for myself that helps me somewhat stay. I say somewhat because I'm very like ADHD, but working on dropping in the presence more and the mind. I think there's more quiet in the mind whenever I can feel into this. In this case, it's like this internal, well, divine feminine energy. So this is ongoing. I appreciate you if you hung in there for the entire video. You might be the one. So that's great, and I appreciate you checking it out. do the whole, if you feel so inspired to like, subscribe, um, hit that notification bell, as some people say. I'd appreciate that. All right. You all take care. It's a blessing to be able to offer this. I'm always open to hearing your thoughts and reflections, so feel free to give me a reach out. All right. Take care.